I did not shout. I did not fight. I just stopped. We had built this business together, my mother, my father, and me. For 16 years, I ran it like it was mine, because they told me it would be. From the time I was 19, I was learning the systems, meeting with clients, traveling between suppliers, handling contracts, working late nights when I should have been out living life. I bought into the idea that if I gave everything now, I would eventually earn my place at the top. And then one day, I found out I was never in the running. It happened quietly. That is the part that still catches me. No big family meeting. No serious discussion. No evaluation of performance. Just a Wednesday morning in February. My mother sent me a calendar invite labeled Realignment Review. It was vague, which meant it was probably important. I walked into that conference room with a pen and a notebook, thinking it was about shifting product lines or tightening costs. But they were already seated when I arrived. Both my parents and my younger brother, who had just flown in from Boston the night before. He had never worked a full month in the company. The first words out of my father's mouth were, "We believe it is time for a change." Not, "We appreciate what you have done." Not, "This was a difficult decision." Just that. My mother passed me a printed announcement draft. "Your brother will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer, effective April." I stared at it for a moment. I actually thought it was a mistake. A mock-up. Maybe they were testing me to see how I would react. But my brother leaned back in his chair, confident like he had been briefed for weeks. My father shifted the conversation to transition planning. My mother started talking about optics, family unity, public messaging. I was still sitting in the same chair, still trying to process. It is hard to describe that kind of betrayal, because it does not feel like a knife. It feels like someone quietly stepping over your work while you are still in the middle of doing it. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead. I nodded, thanked them for their time, and walked out. That was the last time we all sat in a room together. I am not dramatic by nature. I do not burn bridges unless I am standing on one that was never mine to begin with. But the reality is this. They built their future around him. So I removed myself from it. And then I began removing everything else. At first I kept showing up to work. I did not want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. But I stopped attending leadership calls. I stopped sending follow-up emails. I let questions sit unanswered. The few people who had worked closely with me started to notice, quietly at first. Then they started asking. I gave them polite, vague answers. Just stepping back, I said, letting others take the wheel. Most assumed I was burnt out. Nobody guessed the truth. They did not know how many systems I had architected myself. They did not know how many deals I personally negotiated, how many contacts I had built from scratch. They just assumed I was the heir apparent, because that was how it looked from the outside. The truth is, I was never in the will. The business was not large in terms of global presence, but it was solid, $38 million in annual contracts, almost, all recurring. We had strong supplier ties, digital infrastructure that was years ahead of our competitors, and an operations dashboard that I had built line by line. I had designed it to scale. I had documented nothing. That was my decision. When I first created the back end, I offered to bring in a systems consultant. My father said no. He wanted it to stay in the family. I took that as a sign of trust. So, I never shared the architecture. I never trained someone else to manage it. And when I realized they had no intention of including me in the future of the company, I realized I was holding the skeleton key to a kingdom that no longer belonged to me. So, over 2 weeks, I took it apart, quietly, methodically, and without emotion. I deleted the master workflow scripts from our server. The backups were hosted on my cloud drive. I wiped them too. I removed access tokens, deleted process automation routines, and reverted every dashboard to its pre-launch version. I left enough for them to survive, but not enough to scale. You might wonder whether I felt guilt. I did not. I was not sabotaging something they built. I was removing my fingerprints from something I had designed and maintained without acknowledgement. They wanted a fresh start. So I gave it to them. One afternoon, about 10 days after that meeting, my brother called me. His tone was light, almost cheerful, like nothing had happened. He asked if I had time to walk him through the supplier portal. "The one with the automatic forecasting model," he said. I told him it no longer existed. He paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean it has been deleted, permanently," he laughed, nervously. "You are joking, right?" "I am not." There was a silence on the other end. Then he asked, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because I did not build it for you." He hung up. The next day I received a formal request from our in-house counsel to transfer all proprietary systems. I replied that no such formal ownership agreement existed. There was no contract, no intellectual property clause, no prior arrangement. Everything I had built was on personal infrastructure, by personal license. They had assumed that my loyalty meant ownership. It did not. I stopped coming to the office after that. I left my badge on the reception desk. The receptionist looked up, but said nothing. I do not think she knew what was happening. Most people did not. From the outside, everything looked normal, but the engine was gone. A few of our longest-standing clients began reaching out to me directly, not knowing I had already stepped away. They had questions: why deliveries were late, why the reporting system was offline, why the quarterly metrics portal was showing gaps. I told them to speak to the new chief executive officer. Within a month, 3 major clients paused contracts. One of them asked if I was open to consulting independently. I declined, for now. I was not ready to get pulled back in. There was a voicemail from my mother, about 3 weeks after the transition. Her voice was strained. She said she hoped I was okay, that they were all just trying to do what was best for the family. That word, family, felt different now. I did not call her back. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened the folder on my hard drive labeled Legacy Plans, and deleted it without hesitation. I am not angry. I am just done. They built a structure around trust. Then they decided it was temporary. So I made my contributions temporary too. It is easy to tell people that loyalty matters. It is harder to mean it when there is power on the table. For 16 years, I thought I was building something that would one day be mine to shape. But I was just the scaffolding. They had always planned to bring someone else to the top floor, so I stepped away. And when I left, I took everything I had built with me. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I did not expect silence to be so loud. The first few mornings after I walked away felt unreal. For 16 years, I woke up with purpose. There was always something, an issue to resolve, a deal to close, a deadline breathing down my neck. But now, my calendar was empty. No meetings, no calls, just quiet. It should have felt like freedom, but it did not. There is a strange kind of ache that sets in when a structure you have spent half your life building keeps standing, just without you in it. I found myself checking the company dashboard out of habit, even though I knew I had deleted the backbone that made it work. I stared at old emails, rereading conversations with vendors, clients, internal teams, most of whom still had no idea I was gone. It felt like I had left my own body. The first sign of fallout came 2 weeks after I deleted the systems. One of them, the regional procurement leads, reached out. He had been with us for over a decade and had always been sharp, observant, methodical. He asked if I had a few minutes to talk off record. I agreed. He did not waste time. "What happened, Grant?" "Everything's falling apart," I paused before answering. I stepped away. Stepped away? He repeated, confused. That is not what we heard. What did you hear? He hesitated. Just that you were taking a break. Burnout or something. Your brother said it had been coming for a while. I smiled, though he could not see it. That is one way to put it. Then he said something I was not expecting. They are trying to reverse engineer the systems. Your brother does not know how half of it works. He keeps asking the developers to just rebuild it. I said nothing. He has no clue what you were doing behind the scenes, he added. They all assumed it just ran itself. That made me laugh just a little. It never did. He paused. Are you coming back? No, I said firmly. I am not. He did not press. But the way he sighed told me what I needed to know. Things were starting to crack. The truth is, when I first stepped away, I thought they would patch it up. Hire someone new. Bring in a consultant, or worse, try to outsource what I had built. But now it was clear. They were fumbling. Because the systems were not plug and play. They were custom, adaptive, tied directly into workflows I had created to fix real inefficiencies. You could not just buy replacements off the shelf. It was like watching someone inherit a car, not realizing the key was never cut for them. But the part that really made things unravel was not the tech. It was the people. You see, I never cared much about titles. But people trusted me because I earned it, not through power, but through action. I picked up the phone when no one else did. I fought for bonuses when margins were tight. I showed up when no one else wanted to, so when I disappeared without explanation, people noticed. And then they started asking questions. One of the sales leads quit. 2 client relationship managers took offers elsewhere. And quietly, a few suppliers began pulling back, delaying shipments, slowing down credit terms, hedging their bets. Internally, they spun it as a market adjustment, but it was not. It was instability. I had seen it before, in other companies we had worked with, when leadership changes happened too fast or too carelessly. But this was different. This was personal. And yet, I was not celebrating it. That surprised me. I thought I would feel vindicated. Watching them try to operate without me, watching cracks form where I had once held things together with bare hands and late nights. But I did not feel satisfaction. I felt sadness, not for them. But for what? It could have been. This company was not just a job. It was supposed to be a legacy, and they threw that legacy behind someone who had not put in the time. Someone who did not know the weight of it. Someone who treated it like a launch pad, not a lifetime. About a month in, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Grant, your brother is struggling. Maybe we should talk. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had been done. Just a hint of desperation, buried under pride. I did not respond. A week later, my mother emailed, a longer message this time. She tried to explain. They had always intended for both sons to be involved, she wrote. That this was not about choosing sides, but evolving the business for the next chapter. It felt rehearsed. Remember sitting with that email open for an hour. Not because I was tempted to reply, but because I realized how far removed they were from reality. They thought this was a chapter shift. It was an epilogue. Eventually, the silence became easier. The weight of resentment lifted, slowly. I began focusing on things I had forgotten I loved, reading, writing, even hiking. I met up with an old college friend who now ran a design consultancy. We talked for hours about creativity, about autonomy, about building something with the right people from the start. That conversation planted a seed. I began to wonder, what if I did it again? Not out of revenge, not as competition, but on my own terms, with no inheritance to corrupt it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had never actually built something for myself. Everything I had done had been in service of the family name, the family vision. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I had a clean slate. No attachments, no obligations, just freedom. Around this time, I started getting more calls, some from former clients, some from employees who had quietly left the company. A few wanted to know if I was starting something new. One even said, "If you do, I want in." I was careful. I made no promises. But the idea kept growing. It is funny how fast things move once you stop trying to fix what broke you and start building what aligns with you. One day I met with a supplier over coffee. We had worked together for over a decade. He told me bluntly, "You were the reason we stayed with them. Your systems, your forecasting, your word. Without you, it feels unanchored." Then he leaned in and said, "Let me know if you ever decide to come back into this space. We will follow." That was the first time I considered it seriously. I went home, opened a blank document, and began outlining a new kind of operation. Smaller, smarter, built for flexibility, not scale. Built around values, not bloodlines, not a revenge play, just a better way. Meanwhile, my brother was being interviewed by a local business journal. He said he was excited to modernize the company and take it in bold new directions. The article mentioned some missteps, minor operational hiccups, but the tone was upbeat. But I knew what was really happening behind the scenes. I had been contacted by one of the company's legacy clients who wanted to terminate their multi-year agreement. They said they no longer had confidence in the strategic direction. They used to call me to fix things. Now they were calling to leave. Still, I stayed quiet. I did not reach out to gloat. I did not post anything public. My focus was forward. My motivation had shifted. It was no longer about what they had taken from me. It was about what I was finally free to build for myself. It started with a spreadsheet, not a press release, not a company announcement, just a clean, blank spreadsheet with nothing on it but my name at the top. That was how the next chapter began. I was sitting at the same kitchen table I had worked from during lockdown years ago. It was quiet, still smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. The only sound in the room was the occasional buzz from my phone, which I had now trained myself to ignore. I was not rushing. I was rebuilding. But not what I had left behind. Something better. I started by listing people. Not investors, not executives. Just people I had worked with, trusted, respected. Quiet names. Ones who stayed late when no one asked, who double-checked. Numbers without being told, who actually listened instead of waiting to talk. I was not building a team yet. I was just writing down reminders of what loyalty looked like. Then I added a second column. Why they stayed with me back then. And what I found was not shocking, but it was sobering. It was never the pay, never the perks, never even the family name. It was trust, consistency. The fact that I never promised things I could not deliver. And when I made a mistake, I owned it. Fully, loudly. That was missing now, in the company I had walked away from, and in a lot of other companies I had quietly watched over the years. I was not trying to fix that for the industry, but I could build one place that did it right. That was the beginning of what would later become a new kind of operation. Leaner, cleaner, and entirely independent. No boardrooms, no politics, no one looking over my shoulder with last names that carried more weight than their contribution. I was building for function, not ego. 1 week later, I made a few quiet calls. Not job offers, just conversations. "Hey, I'm putting some thoughts together," I told a former operations analyst. "No titles, no promises. Just a chance to do things differently. If you ever want to talk about it, no pressure." Most people were cautious at first. Some were still tied up in old contracts or still recovering from burnout. But not one person turned me down flat, and a few were faster than I expected. One call led to another. One chat turned into a meeting. Before long, I was standing in a co-working space on the east side of the city, with 3 people and 2 laptops, sketching out architecture for a modular logistics model that could replace bloated middle management in small to mid-size supply chains. It was real. It was happening, and nobody was asking who I was related to. That was the first time in months I felt like myself again. But with growth came questions. And one of the hardest ones hit me over lunch with a former client, someone who had worked with my family's company for over 12 years. He leaned in and said quietly, "Are you poaching us?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No, I am not. I have not approached a single one of you." He nodded slowly. "Good, because we are thinking about leaving anyway." I blinked. "You are?" He exhaled. "We stayed for the systems. We stayed because of you. You're gone. The systems are gone. What we're left with is chaos, and we're too old for chaos." I did not pitch him anything. I just listened. He paused, then asked, "If we walked and we needed a new partner, would you talk to us?" And there it was. The line I had been dancing around since the beginning, because I had not intended to take business from the company I left. But now that business was asking to come with me. There are rules in every industry, written and unwritten, and while I had not signed a non-compete, I knew the gray area I was stepping into. But I also knew this: you cannot steal something that was already walking away on its own. So I nodded. "If you reach out to me, I will always take the call." That was all I said. Over the next 2 weeks, I got 4 more calls like that. From vendors, from consultants, even from someone in finance. Quiet voices, testing the water. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. They trusted me. Not the family name, not the title. Me. Meanwhile, I started getting texts from my brother. The tone was different now, no longer smug but short, clipped. The last one said, "Are you talking to our clients?" Our clients. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. I never replied, because they were never his clients. They were relationships I had built. Through every product launch, late-night email, missed holiday, and sleepless quarter. I had earned them, not inherited them. But the question lingered in the air, and I knew eventually the tension would come to a head. It did. 3 weeks later, I got a letter. Formal, but sloppy. Accused me of interfering with ongoing contracts, warned me about potential consequences, and demanded I confirm in writing that I would not solicit existing relationships. I handed it to my attorney. She laughed. "They are bluffing. No non-compete. No legal ground. This is fear-talking." Still, it rattled me, not because of the threat, but because of what it confirmed. They were losing control, and they knew exactly. Why, by then I had something real. We had just onboarded our first client, a small but sharp operation that had been stuck with a bloated vendor for too long. They gave us a shot, and within 10 days, we cleaned up their procurement flow, cut their costs by nearly 18%, and identified 2 inventory leaks their previous vendor had missed for months. They were blown away. So was I. Not because I doubted us, but because I realized just how rare it had become to be honest, fast, and efficient. In an industry drowning in politics and bloated legacy processes, we were oxygen, and people noticed. More inquiries followed. Still, I kept things quiet. No website, no branding, just word of mouth and performance. The people who knew, knew. And those who did not, well, I was not trying to prove anything to them. But my brother kept calling. Eventually, I picked up. His voice was tight. "You think this is fair?" I was calm. "Do you?" "I worked hard for this, Grant." "So did I. For 16 years. You abandoned the company. I walked away from something that no longer valued me. He exhaled, frustrated. You are destroying everything. No, I said. You did that when you acted like I was disposable. Silence, then, finally, you will regret this. I almost said something, but I stopped myself because I already knew I would not. What I felt in that moment was not rage, it was clarity. The kind that comes when you stop begging people to see your worth and just build where you are respected. That night I updated the spreadsheet, added 2 more clients, and beneath that, I added a new note. You are not rebuilding to prove them wrong. You are rebuilding because you are finally free to do it right. I had been avoiding the phone call, not because I did not know what I would say, but because I knew exactly how it would go. My mother finally called on a Sunday, early morning, before the city had really woken up. She always knew how to catch me when I was least defensive. "Hi, sweetheart," she started gently, like none of it had happened. "Hi." Long pause. Then, "Can we talk?" I stayed quiet. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned silence made people more honest than questions ever did. She sighed. "It's getting messy, Grant." I looked out the window at the small cafe across the street. Steam rising off coffee cups, a young couple laughing over a shared croissant. All things that used to feel distant to me. Now they looked like peace. "Messy how?" I finally asked. "We're getting emails. Clients are asking questions. Some of them are leaving." I nodded slowly. "That tends to happen when trust leaves first." She bristled. I could hear it. "You cannot punish us forever." I am not punishing anyone. I just stopped protecting what no longer protects me. Another pause. "You always had the bigger vision," she said. "That was never in question." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it had taken 4 months, multiple resignations, and a threatened lawsuit for her to say what I had known all along. I did not need to be CEO, Mom. I just needed to be respected. Silence again. Then she whispered, "Your father is worried." I could hear the subtext, worried about the business. Not me. I leaned back in the chair. "He should be. Grant, I did not start this, but I am not going to apologize for doing what I do best." Her voice dropped lower, almost pleading. "Would you ever come back?" That stopped me cold. Not because I had not imagined it before, but because this was the first time she had said it. "Under what terms?" I asked. "I do not know," she said quietly. "Just come to dinner. Let us talk." I closed my eyes, and for a second I pictured it. Sitting across the table from the brother who had quietly taken what I built. Watching our father pretend nothing was wrong. Hearing them say the word family like it covered the cost of betrayal. "I will think about it," I said. But I already knew the answer. That night I met with 2 clients, both legacy accounts from my old life, both now operating under a new service model we had designed from scratch. What we had done in 3 months took some of our old competitors a year. No unnecessary meetings, no overlapping roles. Just tight systems, smart people, and clean execution. We were not a company yet. Not officially, but we were working like one. And our reputation was spreading. One of the clients leaned over as we wrapped up. "You know what this feels like?" "What?" "Back when companies actually delivered what they promised." That stuck with me, because he was right. We had not reinvented the wheel, we just stopped making it spin for the wrong people. 2 days later, I agreed to go to that dinner. It was not forgiveness, it was observation. I needed to see it with my own eyes. How far gone it really was, I showed. Up at 7 p.m. sharp, no tie, no briefcase, just a plain shirt, and the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. They tried to act normal. My mother fussed over the food. My father poured wine. My brother sat stiffly, trying not to show how rattled he was, but his eyes kept flicking to mine, like he could not believe I had actually come. Dinner started with small talk, then questions. "How's your new project?" my father finally asked. "Doing well," I replied simply. My brother jumped in. "We've heard things." "Then you have been listening in the right places." My mother tried to diffuse it. "We're just surprised you would work with some of our former clients." "I did not reach out to any of them," I said. "They found me." "You understand how that looks?" my brother pressed. "Yes. I also understand how it feels to be replaced quietly and expected to act like it never happened." He flinched, then got quiet. I turned to my father. "You built a business on values, but somewhere along the way, you started managing optics instead of people. That was your mistake, not mine." He clenched his jaw. "We needed a change." "No," I said, calmly. "You needed control. And now you are realizing what happens when people stop letting you have it by default." No one spoke for a long moment. Then my mother asked the one question none of them had dared say out loud. "Grant, what do you want?" And that was the moment. Not just of power, but of choice. I looked each of them in the eye. "I do not want your job back. I do not want your apology. I want distance, and I want you to understand that whatever happens next, I will not be cleaning it up." That was it. No drama, no ultimatum. Just truth. I stood up, thanked them for the meal, and left. As I walked back into the night, I felt lighter than I had in months, because I was no longer looking for a way back in. I was walking all the way out, and right into something that day by day was becoming more real than anything I had left behind. The next morning we registered the company, gave it a name, signed papers, took photos. Nothing flashy, just a moment of recognition. From that point on, there was no more gray area. We were real. Our team was growing. Our systems were scaling. The inquiries were coming in faster than expected. And through it all, I had one rule. No shortcuts. Not in hiring. Not in delivery. Not in values. Because I had already seen what happened when convenience replaced principle. I had already lived the result, and I had deleted it. Literally, in some cases. I found an old drive one night, full of documentation I had created in my last few years with the family company. Frameworks, onboarding templates, architecture for scalable regional expansion. Hundreds of hours of work. All mine. All designed to help us grow without losing quality. All things they had either ignored or buried after I left. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted the entire folder. Not out of pettiness, but because I knew I could build it better now. Smarter, cleaner, faster, and with people who did not need convincing to do the right thing. By the end of that quarter, we had 7 clients, 3 employees, 2 contractors, and 0 regrets. My brother sent one more message. This time it was short. "You proved your point." I did not reply, because it was never about proving anything. It was about preserving what I still had, and letting go of what was already gone. I used to think peace came after the battle. But real peace, real clarity, it comes when you stop trying to win anything. It comes when you finally decide that the truth is enough. 3 months after I walked away from my family's business, our new company crossed a revenue threshold I had once thought would take a full year. We were lean, precise, and clear about who we were serving. There was no confusion in our branding, no mixed messaging in our pitch, and no pretending to be bigger than we were. The work spoke for itself. But with growth came noise. People started talking. Quietly at first, then louder, especially in circles, where my family's business used to dominate. I began getting emails from former suppliers, former partners, even former competitors who were suddenly acting like I had always been a visionary, a word they never used when I was in the background, doing the actual building. One afternoon, I got a call from a firm that had declined our partnership 2 years earlier. Back then, they said our ideas were too ambitious and out of sync with traditional structure. Now they wanted to invest. I took the meeting. Not because I needed their money, because I wanted to hear how they would phrase the rewrite. They showed up with a pitch deck full of praise. Terms like disruptive architecture and next-gen operational scale were tossed around like candy. I let them finish. Then I said, "Where was all this enthusiasm when I had a business card from a family name instead of my own?" They shifted in their chairs. One of them finally said, "To be honest, Grant, you were the engine. We just did not realize it until the car stopped running." I nodded. "I appreciate the honesty, but I am not for sale." We parted respectfully. It was not arrogance. It was alignment. I knew what I was building now, and it had nothing to do with making anyone else feel comfortable. But the attention did not stop there. A tech podcast invited me on. A mid-sized agency offered a full rebrand. A former board member from my family's business reached out just to say, "I think you're on the right side of history." The irony was almost laughable, because I was not trying to be right. I was trying to be real, and real meant staying focused. We had just signed our 9th client when the first crack appeared. One of the junior team members, sharp guy, full of ideas, but still learning the ropes, made a mistake on a client file. A minor one, but it could have caused friction if we had not caught it early. I sat down with him, explained what happened, and expected the usual learning moment. Instead, he got defensive. He said, "I thought this place was different." I leaned forward. "It is. That is why I am telling you this directly, instead of burying it in a meeting or pretending it didn't matter." He did not respond, just nodded stiffly and walked out. A week later, he resigned. I told the team the truth, that we had made a good hire, but not every good hire stays, and that our standard of honesty is not something we lower just to avoid uncomfortable conversations. It was the first real test of leadership in this new version of myself, and it reminded me of something I had forgotten while running the family business. Clarity costs. When you are clear about what you expect, you will lose people. When you are clear about what you stand for, you will be misunderstood. But when you hold the line, you will attract those who are not looking for comfort. They are looking for commitment. 2 days after that resignation, I got an email from someone I had worked with years ago, a project manager who had watched me silently take on half of operations while others took the credit. He had followed my story quietly, heard the rumors, watched the headlines. His message said, "I left last month. I am tired of companies where titles matter more than contribution. If you are hiring, I am in. I will start at the bottom if I have to. I just want to be part of something that's actually going somewhere." That was it. No resume, no pitch, just a statement of intent. I hired him within a week, and I told the team, "This is how we grow. Not through noise. Through people who choose the work, not the spotlight." By the start of summer, we had 12 clients, 5 full-time employees, and the first real offer to acquire us. It came from a legacy competitor, one I knew well. They had laughed at our pricing structure a year ago. Now they were offering 8 figures to buy us out before we got any bigger. The number was tempting, but the intent was obvious. They did not want to grow with us. They wanted to bury us. I turned it down. My lawyer said I was insane. "Grant, you could walk away right now. Retire. Start anything else." I smiled. I already walked away from something. This I am building. The day after I declined the offer, I got a call from my father. He did not ask how I was. He asked, "Are you really turning down that kind of money?" I said, "Yes." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked something that surprised me. Are you happy? I paused, not because I did not know the answer, because I had not said it out loud in a long time. Yes, I am, he sighed. Good. You earned it. I just wish we had seen it sooner. I did not say anything, not because I was bitter, but because forgiveness is not something you give just to move on. It is something you live in real time. You forgive by showing up to your own life fully. And that is what I was doing now. By the end of that week, we launched our first leadership program. Not because we were trying to scale quickly, but because we were attracting people who wanted to stay, and we owed them structure. And as I sat in the back of the room during the first session, watching a room full of young builders talk about culture, execution, clarity, I felt something I had not felt in years. Stillness. The kind that does not need validation. The kind that does not apologize for outgrowing the room you were assigned to. I stepped outside after the session ended. Checked my phone. One unread. Message from my brother. Just one line. You were right. I was not ready. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted the message. Not out of anger, but because closure does not always need a response. Sometimes the cleanest ending is no reply at all. Growth is strange. At first it is survival. You are trying to prove something. To yourself, to others, to whoever doubted you when you were still invisible. Then it becomes structure. You learn to manage expectations, delegate, forecast, adjust, and finally, if you are lucky, it becomes pressure. Not from failure, from success. Because now people expect you to be what you once fought to become. We were now in our second year. 12 clients had become 18. 2 of our competitors had quietly closed shop. One had even applied for a consulting contract under a different name. Our team was still small, but tight. Everyone had a voice. Everyone had a seat at the table. People worked hard because they believed they were building something different, not just profitable, but purposeful. And I had never felt more clear in my role. Until the email came in. It was from a private firm based overseas. Not flashy, but powerful. They had been watching us for months, studying our model, tracking our results. The email was short and direct. We believe your structure could scale across 3 continents. We would like to explore what that looks like. With you at the helm. Name your terms. It was not an acquisition offer, it was an expansion offer, with full operational control, they claimed, full funding, full freedom. Except one clause. One that I would not understand the weight of until later. We reserve final say in regional compliance and narrative framing. I reread that sentence 3 times. Narrative framing. A nice way of saying, we will decide what story gets told. On paper, it looked like a dream. Millions in capital. International footprint. A platform 10 times larger than what I had now. I brought it to the team. Not because I was leaning toward it, but because I believed. In transparency, I wanted them to know where we stood. The reactions were mixed. Some were cautious, some were energized. A few were already talking about what cities we could open first, but one voice stood out. Annika. She had been with me since the start. Took a pay cut to join. Built most of our onboarding and internal systems from scratch. She said nothing during the entire meeting. Afterward, she pulled me aside and said, Grant, I joined you because I saw how you left. I saw the way you deleted everything because it was never yours to begin with. I am just asking, is this any different? That sat with me. Not because she was accusing me of selling out, but because I had almost missed it myself. We were not being asked to expand. We were being asked to license our values, to dress them up in someone else's branding. I spent the next week in silence, no meetings, no calls, no external press. Just thinking. Because the hardest decisions are not the ones that involve money or visibility. They are the ones that test whether you actually meant what you said when no one was listening. I went back and read my original notes. The ones I wrote the night I left the family business. Just raw thoughts, questions, frustrations, promises. One line hit me hardest. I do not want to build something that only survives in rooms where I am not allowed to speak. That was it. That was the answer. This offer would triple our size, but it would cost us our voice. I turned it down, respectfully. Clearly, the response was colder than I expected. People like you think principals pay bills. Wait until the market turns. I smiled at that because I had already lived through the kind of business where you trade voice for volume. I had walked out of that once, and I was not going back, but saying no does not come without consequences. Within a month, we started noticing friction. Small things at first, clients not renewing without warning. Referral partners going quiet. An article surfaced online claiming our growth was inflated and unstable. We traced it. The source was anonymous. But the timing was not accidental. That firm, despite our polite rejection, was making moves to discredit us. I told the team the truth. No panic. We just hold the line. Truth scales too. We adjusted, tightened our messaging, doubled down on client communication, focused on what we could control. And slowly, the noise faded, but the scars remained. It was the first time I truly understood what it meant to defend something you built from scratch. Not just the business, the belief behind it. And it reminded me that conviction is expensive. Especially when you are not shouting. Especially when you are not backed by the loudest checkbook. But we kept going because we knew what the alternative looked like. One morning, I got a call from an old friend I had not spoken to since I left the family company. He said, "You are a case study now. People talk about you in rooms you do not even know exist." I asked him what they were saying. He said, "Depends who you ask. Some say you are stubborn. Others say you are the only one who got it right." I laughed. I can live with either. But he paused and added, "Your brother." He stepped down. I did not react at first. Really? Yeah. Board finally saw it. Numbers are down. Staff turnover is brutal. Your systems were the only thing holding that place together. I did not ask for details. I did not ask what happened next, because I had already moved forward. That same day, we got an inbound request from a client I used to manage under the family business name, someone I had built a relationship with for 5 years. They wanted to work with me again, not my family. Me. They said, "We stayed loyal to the company out of respect, but the work is not the same. You built it. We see that now." I took the call. Not to gloat, but to rebuild trust. And this time, I signed them under our name. Not because we needed the deal, because I wanted to close the loop. This was the slow revenge that no one sees coming. Not revenge through destruction. Revenge through excellence. By the end of that quarter, we had a waiting list of clients. We had doubled our retention, and we were hosting our first internal summit. A gathering of people who believed in what we were doing, not just what we were producing. And as I stood in front of the team, 35 people now, from 6 different cities, I told them the truth. We were never supposed to make it this far. Not because we are not good enough, but because we refuse to bend. And that is exactly why we are still here. The applause was real. Not loud, not performative, just solid. Afterward, Annika came up to me. She said, "You remember that first meeting? The one where I asked if this was different?" I nodded. She smiled. "It is." And for the first time in years, I felt complete. Not full of pride, full of peace. The kind that only shows up when you stop chasing approval and start building legacy. And as I walked out of that summit hall, into the quiet evening, I thought about the one thing I had not done. Since I left the family business, I had never driven past the old building. Maybe I was avoiding it. Maybe I thought I was above it. But something in me said, go see it. So I did. That night, I drove past the old office. The lights were off, the sign had changed, a leasing banner hung from the second floor. Empty, hollow, gone. And I did not feel joy. I felt confirmation that sometimes, to build something worth remembering, you have to walk away from something they told you could never be replaced. Some endings do not come with applause. Some come quietly, with a phone call you almost ignore. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. Our new office had just finished its build-out. Exposed wood, clean white walls, high windows with too much sunlight. It looked nothing like the old one, and maybe that was the point. I was wrapping up a review meeting when my phone buzzed. A number I did not recognize. Out of habit, I ignored it. A minute later, it rang again. Same number. I picked up. A pause. Then, Grant, it's your father. His voice had aged. Or maybe I had changed. Can we talk? He asked. I did not say anything for a few seconds. Then I said, you just did. He chuckled softly, like he expected the resistance. I do not blame you. I would not take my call either if I were you. I stayed silent. Then he continued, I want to meet. No agenda. Just talk, face to face. It had been over 2 years, no calls, no letters, not a word when I left. And now suddenly he wanted a meeting? I do not have much to say, I replied. He did not flinch. Then just listen. That is all I am asking. Against every part of me that said no, I said, all right. 1 hour. My terms. Public place. We agreed on a small cafe halfway between the new office and the old one. Neutral ground. When I walked in, he was already seated. Back straight, hands folded, coffee untouched. He looked thinner. Older? He stood when he saw me. I did not. He sat back down. We sat in silence for a moment. The kind that feels like someone is winding back the years just to see what broke. He finally said, I owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow. For what? The title? The meetings you stopped inviting me to? Or the 2 years of pretending I did not exist? He nodded slowly. All of it. And more. I let the silence drag again. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Your brother stepped down. The board asked him to. The numbers, they never stabilized. He could not hold the team. Could not recreate what you built. I said nothing. He continued, we thought we were choosing the safer option, the more controlled one. But it turns out, control does not create loyalty. It does not create growth. You did. I folded my arms. You did not just call to admit you were wrong. What do you want? He looked me dead in the eye. We want you back. I shook my head, half smirking. You want me to fix it? No, he said. We want you to lead it. Full control, clean slate, your terms. It felt like déjà vu. Except this time, I was not hungry for approval. I was already full. I leaned back. And what about the board? We will clear the path. And what about the name? We will change it. That part caught me off guard. You are willing to erase the legacy name? We already lost what mattered. The name means nothing without people who know what to do with it. I looked out the window. Thought about the nights I stayed late in that office. The systems I built. The clients I coached. The team I protected. And then I thought about what we had now. A new team. A new way. A company that did not just work. It meant something. I turned back to him. You said something once, I said. You told me I was too idealistic to run a real company. He nodded slowly, ashamed. I remember. Well, That idealism pays 27 people now, gave 10 of them their first full benefits, and brought back clients who left you without saying why. He lowered his eyes. I continued, calm but direct. You do not need me to fix it. You need to let it end. He looked up. So that is it? I gave him a chance to say more. But he did not, so I stood up. I did not burn the old place down, Dad. I just stopped pretending it was still home. I started to walk away. But before I left, I turned back one last time. There is one thing I will offer. He looked up. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and placed it on the table. This is a referral. A group that specializes in distressed legacy businesses. They will not save the company, but they might help you shut it down with dignity. He nodded, and that was the last time I saw him. Not out of hatred, but closure, because not every wound needs a reunion. Some just need a final line. I walked out of the cafe feeling nothing, and that, in itself, was everything, because the story that once defined me had finally let me go. That weekend, I gathered the team. I did not tell them about the meeting, not the details, but I gave them the summary. Our old house is falling. They asked me to help rebuild it. I said no. They waited. I smiled. Because we already built something better. I gave everyone the next day off. Told them to rest. Because Monday, we were launching something new. Our internal training platform. We called it Second Draft. Named after the idea that the first version of anything, your work, your family's business, your identity, is never the final one. You get to write again. Rebuild, reclaim. That Monday, I recorded the first internal video for the platform. Not flashy. Just me speaking directly to our people. I said, "You are not here by accident. This company is not here because we were smarter or luckier. We are here because we were willing to let go of what looked safe in order to build what felt right. Every person in this company is a second draft. And we are proud of that. Because second drafts are honest. Second drafts are earned. And second drafts are the ones that last." We released the video that morning. By noon, it had been watched 50 times. By the end of the week, every employee had shared their own second draft story internally. Some were about leaving toxic jobs. Some were about rebuilding confidence after being passed over. Some were about family. One was about surviving cancer. None of it was performative. It was just real. And that is what this business had become. Not just a service. Not just a strategy. A mirror for people who had outgrown their old story. 6 months later, I got one last message. Not from my father. Not from my brother. From a woman who used to handle contracts for the old company. She said she had quietly followed our journey for a while, and she said this: "I used to think legacy meant staying loyal to the name, but now I realize it is staying loyal to the values. Thank you for reminding me what that looks like." I read that message and just sat still for a moment because that was the win. Not revenue, not headlines. Recognition from someone who had nothing to gain. Someone who saw it all and saw it differently now. And that, to me, was the full circle. I closed my laptop, stood up, took a walk, and for the first time in years, I did not feel like I was escaping something. I just felt free, because this time I did not have to delete anything. I had built it from scratch, and I knew exactly where everything was.